Hello, and welcome to Take Control of Your Career. If you are looking to level up in your career, then you are in the right place. Today, I am joined by Shilpa Bhandari. She is the Senior Vice President at Birlasoft and Global Head for Banking, Financial Services, and Insurance Solutions. Shilpa, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Lauren. It's such a pleasure to be with you today.
Great. Well, I'm really looking forward to our conversation. So just let's get started by hearing a little bit more about yourself. So tell us about you and your career progression.
Sure. Thank you. As I reflect on my career, which is now over 2 decades of being in P&L leadership roles, general management roles, and go-to-market leadership roles, and in a large part of that in multinational companies with global presence. I think about my career in 3 phases, Lauren, right? As I lead up to the current role that I play at Birlasoft, those 3 phases have been extremely important in my career progression. The first phase, I think of that as the launch phase. And this was really the phase of my career, I would say the first 4 to 5.5 years after business school, when I really launched myself in the professional world and took roles on that were in market making, sales, business development, and technology services and technology organizations. And this was the period where I think I was just trying to learn about how organizations function. You learn about that when you're in business school or whatever maybe your education background, but nothing is like being there and being a part of a real organization. And I think that that first phase of launch was super important for me to just, get to grips with how things function and how one can be effective and valuable in that phase. The second phase of my career, I think of it as the build phase. And this was really also coinciding with the internationalization of my experience. So I spent the first 5 years or so of my career in India in different markets, and then moved here to the United States in an international assignment. And that was the start of the build phase of my career. And this phase, I would say probably was the next 4 to 5 years of my career. And that this was marked by taking on more complex, roles, regional, leadership responsibilities, taking on more high pressure assignments and being really accountable for business results and seeing what that really meant in a more complex setting, and certainly, getting the exposure to working right here in the United States from a cultural perspective. And the third phase of my career, which I think is probably the last 11 or so years, is what I would call the lead phase. And this is defined by me really shifting. Some of it is by design, and some of this is by the opportunities that came my way towards thinking of myself as an enabler to my teams. And this is when I really moved to larger people management roles, being able to own the strategy execution and the result phase of the roles that I was in. And it really did become more about the team and what we delivered and less about myself. And all of that obviously is catapulted to the role that I play today for the firm that I work for, that I'm very proud to, Birlasoft. I lead the global banking, financial services, and insurance business. So I lead the P&L, and I'm accountable for revenue growth, profitability, and obviously customer satisfaction and the engagement of the teams that deliver. So that really defines my career progression. And if I were to say one thing that's common across all of those phases, and certainly what is about to come in the future, is learn. I think of myself as somebody that is yearning to learn. And as I have continued to progress in leadership roles, I think that one quality and one element I certainly want to keep alive and frankly do more of. So that's a little bit about the last 21 or so years.
Wonderful. Thanks for that framework. I really like that it's launch, build, lead, and learn is the red thread through all of that. So I think that's a great way for a lot of people who are watching or listening can relate to thinking, okay, where am I right now, and how do I need to think about what are some of the skills that I need to learn along the way to get to that next phase then? So really a fantastic framework. So tell us a little bit about, in the last few years, actually, you've had quite a bit of change in your career. So walk us through that and how you've made decisions about when it was time to make a move.
Sure, and you are right. There's been quite a bit of change, certainly in the last 5 to 6 years. And in hindsight, the reality is sometimes one seeks change and other times change seeks you. But the only constant is the change. And one, realizes that as one has lived through, the career path, that change is the only constant. So, one of the things that I have now begun to understand more as I have progressed in my career is, first and foremost, to make the right decisions, you need to get comfortable with change. It's not easy. I don't think it has been easy for me. And even today, right, when there is huge amounts of change happening, getting comfortable with change is the first step, and it's really important. It's a mindset. It's not something that, you cannot just, sort of flip a switch and say, look, this is how it is. You have to practice it. You have to learn it. The second phase of that is to embrace it, because if I reflect on all changes, sometimes, what may look as good or bad, they are all seeded with opportunity. So once you start to embrace the changes around you, you will be able to unearth the opportunity. Some may be immediate, but some may be a little bit longer term. So that's the second piece of it. And the third piece of how I've made decisions is, what can you cull out from that change situation that can be a benefit to you or the environment that you're in? Is this an opportunity, therefore, for you to reskill yourself? Is this an opportunity for you to try and get a different kind of experience that you may not have? And certainly in the last 4 to 6 years, I've had the opportunity to be a part of a, experience M&A from the perspective of organizational integration, right? What does it mean from a leadership integration perspective? Because I had the opportunity to work for a large, globally known multinational brand, but American, right? Rooted here with presence, in 80 plus countries. And when the business was sold to another large multinational brand, but with roots in Japan, again, equally large, in fact, larger, I had that opportunity, and that change was not something that I seek. This was really the broader context that brought that on. I had the opportunity to see what it means to look at organizational integration very closely from a cultural perspective, from a leadership style perspective, from a strategic prioritization perspective. So even though I didn't seek that change, I was able to get so much of a varied experience, living through it and certainly learning from it. More recently in my career, I have pivoted to, stepping outside of the large multinational, maybe a larger scale environment to work at Birlasoft, which is a strong, but a tier 2, a smaller scale digital services company. And I think this change has given me the opportunity to probably look at how one can be more entrepreneurial, right? How one can be more agile, how organizations can potentially make decisions faster. And that probably is an example of change that I brought on myself to seek a certain, different kind of experience. So I think the biggest learning that I've had is get comfortable with change, whether it's change that you have seeked for yourself or your context has brought upon you, and try and cull from that what positive impact, near term, but even longer term, right, that you can create for yourself.
Right. And one of the things, going back to your answer in the last question, is that you're a learner. So tell us, Shilpa, what you were hoping to learn out of this shift that you brought on for yourself when you moved to Birlasoft.
Sure. I think the move to Birlasoft, which was essentially a move to embrace a smaller scale, a smaller tier provider, was oriented towards me, as I said before, right, being in an environment which is far more entrepreneurial. I'm in the technology services and technology consulting and digital world, and the pace of change in this industry, and certainly in every business that it affects, is humongous. And I think we need to be, as leaders and certainly as organizations, be in environments where you can very quickly respond, react, and be more proactive with the change. So I think one of the goals was to be able to create solutions and services, and certainly be a business that can be far more agile and far more innovative. And those are some of the goals that I had for me and of course my team and my firm. And I'm hoping to be successful in meeting those.
Yes, absolutely. Well, it's a great way to think about it. You know, what are the things that are critical in the market, and how do you need to make sure to make sure that your career is keeping pace with the market? And that was a really
Absolutely
great awareness there, and a strategic shift for you personally. So one of the things that I think is really interesting about senior leaders is that we've all had serious challenges along the way. And I'm sure you can attest to that. And sometimes, you know, it's just not so obvious to those of us on the sidelines, or those who look at you and they think that you've got it all figured out every step of the way just because you've reached such a great pinnacle in your career. And the reality is, you've already told us you're always still learning. So tell us how you've handled some setbacks in your career, because I think that's something that a lot of women especially are really interested in hearing, that authenticity from you.
Sure. And look, I've had many setbacks, right? And I value each one of them. Whether it's a challenge, it's a setback, it's a failure, whatever you call it, right? Or you define it as a promotion that you so thought that you needed and deserved at that point in time in your career. Or it was, you know, a deal that you brought to the table and you felt that you really did not get the recognition that you so very well deserved. Or it was a raise that you thought would come at that particular time in the, you know, in the cycle and did not. Or it was an exit that was, you didn't see it coming and it was very hard to negotiate. You know, there are examples, right, in everybody's career. And certainly, you know, I can vouch that the more successful you know, externally you are viewed, the more challenges you have overcome. Whenever I've had setback in my career, I have tried to rationalize, and I use a very simple framework, right? And that framework has 3 R's, and then it's followed by, you know, 3 more. But the first opportunity that a setback gives you is the opportunity to reflect. Because when you are, you know, in a difficult situation, very often, right, you try to be defensive, but I think reflection is a very important element of trying to understand the setback and challenge. And sometimes it's great feedback that comes your way that may be very helpful. The second thing that's super important to me, and certainly I know that to women, and I know it's to men too, is to recharge. And I think, you know, when you are bogged down by professional, you know, challenges or personal, you need to really find that energy, that positive energy, and whether that comes to you from an activity that you do, or your family, or your children, or simple things like, you know, just shopping. I think you have to have those triggers that can help you recharge and get, you know, positive energy back in your system. And the third, you know, piece that I think about is, you know, repivot. This may be really an opportunity for you to repivot yourself, right? This challenge may be a blessing in disguise. And by repivot, usually I've seen 3 things emerge, and it doesn't have to be that is one of those. It can be all of those, right? One is reskilling. You know, you may have run a certain kind of business with a certain mix, but, you know, the industry or you know, the skill that's valued is shifting somewhere else. So, you know, as a leader, you have to be relevant and you have to reskill yourself. The second repivot is rebrand, right? You could be known as somebody that runs a certain, you know, you can only run $100 million business, but your ambition is to run $500 million business. But your brand is a subscale brand of a leader. So how do you therefore use this as an opportunity in the repivot to rebrand yourself, right? And that's just an example. And the third one I think is very important is you got to probably sometimes reconfigure your context. You may be doing all the right things, but maybe you're in an organization or with a team that is just not going to see that value in you beyond the limit that you've reached. And it's probably the right time for you to just redesign your context and find a way out. And you know, that's a positive outcome for all parties sometimes. So I would say this is probably the best approach that I've been able to come up with to manage setbacks. And I know there will be more in future, but the setback, the other positive side, positive effect of setbacks is they make you stronger as a leader. And I can tell you that, you know, the more you want to grow in your career, the more strength of character, of decision making is what firms, companies, you know, leaders, CEOs value. So, you know, leverage all of that. Challenges are certainly, or setbacks are blessings in disguise.
Great. I love that framework. It makes it so simple. And you gave an example earlier of a situation where maybe you go for a promotion and you don't get it. And okay, how do you think about it? I was just talking to a woman the other day who had that same situation. She originally wasn't even going to go for the promotion. And then, she built up her courage to talk to her manager about it, got some support along the way, but in the end did not get it. But the great thing about that situation, even though she didn't get it now, she signaled to her leadership that she was interested in that next level. And then she got feedback around what it is that was perceived to be missing. So what you're talking about, that rebranding, that reskilling, what are the things that you need to do next to position yourself next time around? So it might be a setback today, but because of that setback, that's what's actually going to move you forward next time.
I agree, Lauren. I'll add one more thing, right? It's always good to know where you stand, right? You can, creating this vision of yourself in your mind and certainly make sure that whatever you are trying to seek, you do back with data and results, right? Because at the end of the day, organizations look for individuals who can produce results. And having the conversation in a constructive way with data and results is always a good thing, because even though you may or may not get what you're seeking, you definitely get where you stand in the minds of those that are making those decisions, right, for the promotion or whatever the expanded responsibility may be. And I have found that that's always a good thing for you to plan your career.
Yeah. And if it turns out that you're seen, like you said, in one way, but you need to pivot yourself, your brand in a different direction, you now have that information so you can determine what some of those next steps are. So great advice. Love that framework. Speaking of other challenges, we talked about how you have had some changes in your career recently. You actually joined Birlasoft at the very beginning of the pandemic. So March 2020 is when you joined Birlasoft in a big role where you were expected to make some big waves. So tell us about how you onboarded during such a challenging time and how you are going about changing the culture in your organization to get the results that you are expected to bring.
Sure. Now, great question, and well, one has certainly lived through that very recently, and we're all still living in a world where pandemic is still there. Look, I think when I joined Birlasoft, the pandemic had not exploded, but soon after that, I was just in a couple of weeks, right? The world was a new place, and every business, right, no matter who you were in every major country, right, was trying to figure out what this means. What in one way that was extremely difficult to try and immerse yourself in a new organization, a new role, but on the flip side of it, when there is a fire, when there is a crisis, I think they're all hands on the deck. You jump right in. And in that sense, we were all as a business team really talking about what does this mean, trying to understand the impact on different industries, trying to understand the impact on our customers, our teams. And I think it gave me the opportunity to come together as a part of the leadership team in a much quicker way, because, there wasn't any time for, right, understand the usual, right, orientation of a senior leader. So that, I think, in some way, right, gave me an accelerated induction into the organization and getting down to really understanding, the levers and where our big challenges were and where, what we needed to do. I also think that, look, one has traveled in these roles all across the world, meeting with clients, meeting, with teams, and certainly that luxury and that almost much needed ability wasn't there. But I was able to leverage technology, just like what we are doing today, and get in front virtually a far greater number of team members in far shorter period of time, and maybe for a much longer period of time. And what I decided to do was to, of course, try and focus these discussions on understanding their role and their challenges and, a little bit, but I also made these discussions far more focused on understanding the person on the other side, right? Their history in the company, even what they have done before that, the broader context of, their family, all of those things, because I think empathy and that ability to connect at a human to human level with, your teams was very, very important. And sort of one really had to do that to build one's own sense of the organization. So certainly I think technology helped in being able to do that at the scale at which one had to do. And the third element, of course, in any organization, in any role, whether it's a senior role or not, there's an organizational official network, which is the organizational design, and one better understand that because that's the basic of you trying to be effective to get your job done. But there's also an informal network, right? All organizations have informal networks because they're all made up of human beings, and that's how human beings are, right? So I think one had to really think more deeply about how does one become, being an outsider coming in, become a part of that, organizational, informal network, the savviness that one needs to understand. But I was very, very pleased. Everybody was so welcoming, and they were extremely supportive. And I think the additional hours that I spent in trying to, understand that have helped us survive through this period of last year, which was quite difficult. And from a customer perspective, I think it gave a very, different kind of access to clients, right? We knew nobody was traveling, and being able to get 15, 20, 30 minutes for, quick connects, getting feedback on things was easier, on a typical, in a more, pre-pandemic world, one would travel and sit down for a nice dinner and have that conversation. One still misses that. But I think being able to get more real-time feedback was much easier. And certainly, I think from a customer perspective, that also helped them getting to know a new leader on the other side, and for me to be able to understand what we needed to do more of and what we needed to do better. So I think those were some of the strategies that worked, but certainly is a unique experience that I have a lot to share and learn from.
Yeah, well, I love the approach of really getting personal with your team. That's one of the things at Impact Group with our leadership programs. One of the things that we say is we're all humans first, people first, and employees second. And so while it's great to make sure that we're focusing on the big picture of the business and the goals and what we need to do to move the business forward, especially during challenging times like this, the importance of being able to connect on that human level is so important, because then it makes everything else so much easier as well.
Fully agree. Fully agree.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the other things that you've brought up several times is the impact of having global roles throughout most of your career, and including an international move. So how has global experience helped you advance your career?
Yeah, no, great question, Lauren. And certainly, I think it's been a big element of why some roles have come my way. The demonstrated ability of having worked in global environments and led global teams. Look, very early on in my career, I had the opportunity to do this sort of a dual role where I was still stationed, in India, in Bangalore, India, but I had to parachute myself to Japan every month, right, and try and build a support for a particular business there. Even though I was not bilingual, I did not speak Japanese. So I had to learn how to communicate, right, with our teams, who were local teams. Some of them were, teams that were actually from India, but had worked in Japan for many years. And that experience early on in my career, in 2004, really helped me understand that, one, it's so important for a person in seeking to be, growing in your career in a leadership role, to see how you can work outside of, the immediate area of focus, the geography that you may be working in, right? And I also realized that I liked to learn about different cultures, about people from different backgrounds, and I wanted to learn how to be effective in that. So that was the first trigger point, in early on in my career. Later on, I have had roles there where I've led teams, and today is, in my current role as well, that are in different parts of the world, come from different cultural backgrounds, and that has, certainly added to the value of my experience. Look, every business today is a global business. Whether you serve customers in a particular country or not, that does not define a global business. Your supply chain is global. Your talent pool, directly or indirectly, is global. So it's very important, in my view, to infuse into your own style, into your own experience, ability to work in that environment. If anything, the COVID-19 crisis has brought right to the forefront how interdependent this global economy and the global world is. So it is even more paramount that that kind of experience one has, and it will continue to be very valuable. It has been
Yeah.
for me.
Yes, and thanks for sharing that background of how you developed that passion for the global business. And a lot of times, assumptions are made about women and international assignments in particular. So if you're in an organization or an industry where global business plays a key role and you have ambitions to grow your career to the C-suite, getting that experience, especially in the form of an international assignment, is very critical. And it's important then to signal that upfront to your manager, to higher levels of leadership, HR, talent management, because sometimes, like I said, the assumptions that women are not as mobile, whether that's domestically or especially internationally, is something that can curtail your career if people just aren't even thinking about you in that context.
No, absolutely right. And I think that's why it's better to have conversations, right, on your interests, on what you're thinking about, and even sometimes even bounce ideas, right, from those that you consider as your well-wishers or mentors, and be known, right, what you're up for.
Yeah, absolutely. Just making sure that you're getting the right experiences and setting yourself up for those next opportunities or the ultimate opportunities is something that you need to really be thinking about from the very beginning. The one last thing I want to ask you about is something that's unique about Birlasoft. You have significant female board leadership, which is really exciting to see. So help me see how that translates through the culture, and how does that affect the focus on diversity at the company overall?
Yeah, no, great question, Lauren. In fact, one of the things that attracted me to the company and then the role was this strong representation of female leaders in our board. We have 40+% today. Of the board is female. In fact, the chairperson of the company, Amita Birla herself, is a lady, and she is extremely involved and engaged in driving the vision forward. So it's an important part, right, of the Birlasoft brand. Even broader than that, Birlasoft is a part of the CK Birla Group, which is a very reputed organization, over 150 years in existence, with 25,000 employees in 5 continents, and built on a high degree of purpose and value. So in all of the businesses of CK Birla Group, and certainly Birlasoft, right, the inclusion and diversity are very, very important elements of the culture. Here in Birlasoft, it's something that I have, again, the honor of, being a part of a cross-functional, team that is defining the agenda for our inclusion, diversity, and equity charter, and defining, what are the things that we should be doing in short term, medium term, and long term. And certainly, we have more work to do, but clearly some of the steps that we have taken around, building a nurturing environment inside the company for diverse talent pool, be it women, be it veterans, be it people from different cultural backgrounds, and other forms of diversity is an important priority. And in addition to that, we are also trying to stretch ourselves and reach outside to our customers, as well as to the ecosystem, our suppliers and other stakeholders that we work with, to have a dialogue on shared values, and then hopefully creating change and learning from each other. So it's an important part of the value system of the company, and certainly a lot more work that needs to happen, but very proud of the fact that we are working towards it.
Great. Well, thank you so much for sharing that background, and also an interesting perspective, especially from the US where you're based, and it's an Indian-based company. And so you really have a little bit of a unique approach on that diversity, because you're looking at it from the multinational perspective as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, in the world that we live in today, location has become almost it is relevant still, but, we are almost location independent, right? Because we're so virtual and are able to connect, right? Cross-border, cross time zones, cross geographies. But inclusion and diversity, I think, are those values that will continue to be very important to build those strong teams.
Yes, absolutely. Because like we were talking about earlier, we're all people first and employees second. So we want to be recognized for who we are and what we bring. So with that, thank you so much, Shilpa, for joining us today. It's been a really great conversation, and you've brought some wonderful frameworks, especially around the 3 R's for challenges. Love that. So it's something for people to circle back around to and make sure that they are able to record that for their future reference and growth. Really appreciate you being here today.
Thank you, Lauren. It was very nice talking to you, and thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.